All right, YouTube, this is it. This is game 30 and 31 of the Scrabble Players Championship, the 84th and 85th game of Scrabble, tournament Scrabble I played in the month of July of 2022. This is a game against Paul Holser. I had been defeated by Paul Holser earlier in the tournament, so again, this was my opportunity to redeem myself against the same opponent. There are two other opponents, I believe, in this tournament that I played twice, Joe Edley and Ed de Guzman, and I lost both games to both of those players. Those are just the ones I'm thinking of. And yeah, if I win this game and I win the next game, at least I can salvage an 18 and 13 record, which is akin to the records I had from 2015 onward. So yeah, it wouldn't be a worse performance than in previous years. But spoiler alert, something that is not that occurs. So game one of two. I'm first against Paul, and the two plays here are Wind and Rye. So Wind scores 4 more points, creates an S hook. Rye scores 18, creates an A hook, and keeps a better leave. And the plays are really close. And when I decided to play Rye, I started to make the play and put it on the board, realized that Rye took an A hook. I think it was like only as I laid the play down that I determined that the A hook existed, and then I was like, maybe I'm not so sure about this anymore. But after a simulation, the plays are very close in value. The LRR leave is horrendous, but the DLNR leave also has a lot of potential problems, specifically that it's 4 consonants. But yeah, I ended up playing Rye, and Paul ends up playing Arc. Here I play Clink to the K. The other candidate plays here are a bit too dangerous, opening triples and hooks that I don't want to really be opening here, and keeping worse leaves. But DIR is actually not a good leave. DIR is only worth 2.6, whereas with Dural, CIN is actually worth 4.7, so I might have misevaluated the value of my leave of DIR, and CIN might actually end up being significantly good enough, significant enough to, yeah, Clark isn't a word, to deal with the 2-point sacrifice of playing Dural. But I think I'm okay with Clink. And here Paul plays QI, which might seem that QI signals a very strong leave, but it's not actually that true. A lot of the time that I play, for example, QI for 11, or that it's the best play in the position, your racks aren't necessarily, your rack leave isn't necessarily very good. You could have a balance of vowels and consonants, and that's about it. So it's true that Paul doesn't have a U, which is a bad tile, and there are other inferences I can draw from what tiles he doesn't have, but it's not necessarily true that his leave is so strong here. But it's probably better than average, and he's probably closer than average to a bingo, which is why I didn't play Amu here, which would be maybe the most aggressive play in the position, opening the F column and an S hook on Amu. And if an Amu's play does come down, I do get Amuse potentially as a comeback. But yeah, I didn't want to open myself up to that possibility, and I decided to take the 4 extra points for Duma, keep a slightly worse leave of EIR, not keeping the vowel and consonant ratio that you really normally want. But I decided to create this F column, wasn't a big deal compared to creating the 11 row. So Duma comes down, Paul plays Sig, and here I made another interesting decision. I played Gi instead of playing Siggy. I think the other plays were just bad. They left the G, and the G is just terrible. But I think the other option here is a very bizarre looking bizarre looking play of Siggy, extending the word that Paul just played and keeping EEHR. That doesn't seem so good, but the value of not opening the triple word is such that keeping EEHR over EIR might actually be okay. But I think E was fine. It's a calculated risk, and yeah, I felt that I should be okay after this a lot of the time. But Siggy, just not to open the triple word, is definitely an alternative play here. So Gi comes down, and Paul makes a nice find of Pugry. And here, there didn't seem to be much to accomplish in this position. I could play Pipa. I don't want to play Paya, that creates too many overlaps of oped and aped and even sped words. AI just seems way too fishy here. So I decided PryPie is an interesting idea. I decided to just take the points for Rapini. The EI leave is still okay with this R in Rapini, and scoring some points seemed to be a good idea here, especially with Paul's likely tiles to be somewhat random at this point. But Paul continues making scoring plays, and minus actually blocks a lot of the board. And here I played Zowie. I could play Wiz, but I think Zowie is slightly better, even though it does allow underlaps with Za and We, or Za and Wo, and also blocks this R. I think getting rid of the extra vowel to try and hit this R first is of utmost importance, because the sport isn't going to stay this way forever. This R is just tantalizing. One of us is probably going to hit it at some point, if not a bingo on the I column. Because it doesn't seem super likely that something with Marca or Marks is going to come down first. This R just seems like it's going to be the thing. And maybe I'm saying that because that is what happened, but you can draw your own conclusions. Faye comes down, so I don't get hit hard here, which potentially means that Paul doesn't have an A, or he doesn't have an A with a D, an A with an N, an A with an R, an A with a T. So it seems somewhat likely that he didn't have an A, which means lots of A's are on C. So C10 Illy is my play. I could also play Milty to take some extra points, but it seemed fine to just keep the better leave again to try and hit this R. But Paul hits it first with routines, and I draw into this rack, which I look for a very long time to try and make sure I'm not missing a bingo, and there indeed is no bingo. The two choices here are Biz and Tiz. Both of them bingo a similar amount, but Tiz has the benefit of keeping a scoring tile, the B. The B isn't a good scoring tile, but if I miss my bingo after Biz, I'm less likely to be able to score than after Tiz. So I think the 4 extra points versus keeping a better scoring tile, it's an interesting decision. They both bingo a similar amount, actually. So I ended up keeping the better leave. And yeah, I was kind of sad here because I knew I was likely to be able to hit back INES with my leave of LITE, but it just didn't seem like it was happening. And indeed, I ran the numbers, and I'm more than a 50% favorite to hit these four floaters after the play of Illy, but it didn't happen this time. And Paul takes the opportunity to make a very nice defensive play of Pharaoh, just to block these 4 prime floating tiles with his lead. And this leaves me somewhat with no choice here to play looted. I draw an extra O and an extra E. I can't really play cooed or cooled. I can't really justify opening this triple and not opening any other part of the board while keeping... I mean, I could play cooled keeping ET, but look at this humongous spot this opens. And I'm not hitting this L very often if I'm keeping an extra L. So I decided to play looted to try and just force things open a little bit. This still falls victim to some 5-letter words. The D, if you hook the D with an E or an I, it's kind of hard to rehook it. So Paul, if he has a 5-letter play at 11G, is going to be pretty defensive. But I'm just hoping he might just play from the D and I get some bingo, or I get some bingo on the 13 and 11 row and he leaves them alone. But in this position, Paul actually had this rack, and he missed a bingo of erosive, which he talked about after the game. He just couldn't find it. And here he actually plays love for 14 rather than playing dove for 24. And his reasoning, he told me, is that I think what he told me is that he didn't seem like it didn't seem like he was super likely to hit this E before me after dove, and he liked the idea of trying to make a 7-letter word next turn on the 11 or 13 row. But yeah, this was a 10-point sacrifice, a very, very bold move that when I saw that he had dove for 10 more points, I was kind of skeptical that this was the correct play. Indeed, he missed a bingo, but I also thought that this couldn't really make that much sense. But given the logic of not wanting to give me this E to play through, and wanting to use the tiles that he's keeping next turn, makes sense. So love comes down, and I respond to love with love it, lovat. And this, I think, was a mistake. There are a lot of plays in this position to consider. There's no bingo, but I can play something like I could play something like aortal. I could play something like aorte, and I could also play oter, which is a play I think I missed. And the reason I want to be playing a lot more tiles here rather than playing is so that I can draw one of the blanks, which is going to be very important. Not necessarily that I need a blank to bingo, but I need a blank to make sure he doesn't have the other both blanks and like is able to just completely destroy me with those. So sometimes drawing the blank isn't because you need it, it's because you need your opponent not to have it. So playing more tiles here seemed really important. And I was worried about plays here, giving back this one row for like huge X plays, huge J plays. But from love, I could probably determine that Paul doesn't have a J or an X, and might not even have a blank or an S. Maybe has an S with this play, but he indeed had both an S and a blank. And yeah, I think I should just play Yordle, play the 6 tiles rather than the 4 tiles to just go for that blank ASAP, and score some points and not worry too much about the J and the X, because again, Paul probably doesn't have either, or didn't have either on the last turn, and I could potentially even draw those and tie the game up next turn. So I think this was a small mistake, but it was good to prevent plays like Jive, which really counteract the idea of me trying to bingo since I'm behind, by scoring, but also by creating a scoring spot when you're ahead and your opponent is clearly committing to trying to bingo. Making a scoring plays, but also making plays that open scoring spots that are not bingo spots, is a very good way to maintain your lead. So Lovat was also kind of trying to prevent that sort of thing, but it wasn't to be. Paul just bingos with Heinies, takes an 100-point lead. I draw the X, and the best I can do is play Axe and just hope for some miracle draw, or that Paul doesn't block. Paul blocks with F for 26. And this was an incredibly cool position here. I draw the J, excuse me, with another A, and immediately the play that comes to mind is Taj. And I was thinking about Taj, like, okay, what can I bingo after this? I can draw Jaravi's. What else can I draw? I can't like draw Sfarages. Like, what can I possibly draw here? Can I draw some like 9-letter word? Okay, I can draw aversions. No, I can't. SO, not SI. I'm just trying to put myself in the mindset that I was in. What can I draw? What can I draw with this play? And it just didn't seem like much. So I'm like, okay, I need to do something more proactive than Taj, but what can I do that like doesn't keep the J? And then I was like, well, I guess I have to keep the J. So I considered this play of Vita, which is a really cool idea. Immediately setting up 60-point J plays like Genes, and also threatening some 7-letter words with the J if I draw a couple consonants. And it seems very hard to block, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that um, Paul could make a play at 13e right over here to block or partially block the lane, and that seemed to block a ton of the things that I was drawing into, and also seemed to score too much. It seemed to score too much to for me to withstand after a 60-point play, because I would still be down over 60 after the 7-point play. But I think this was the best play. I analyzed this position, I believe, with Noah Walton after. Was it with Noah? Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was with Jackson. I don't know. I analyzed this position with somebody, and it seemed like Vita was probably the best play, even considering attempts to block. For example, there doesn't seem to be, I guess there's Hent for 4 points, but then I might actually just win with the 60-point play. So if you try to block, I don't even know if Hent takes an S. Anyways, I already analyzed this position, but Vita seemed like the best play, but I played Tav because this created a protected lane as well on the 15 row that only I could hit, and created enough space so that plays on the 13 row wouldn't block. And it seemed very difficult to do anything after this, but the problem is I'm just not drawing into things that often. It's just very difficult to draw into a winning play here. And indeed, what ends up happening is I play Tav. Paul agonizes. Of course, this play is very, very scary from Paul's perspective. But he ends up trying to block with Vang, interfering with the continuation of the play that I might make on the 15 row. And I draw this rack and play Hodges for 70, thinking it just can't be enough, and that there's nothing I can do about him playing bod in either spot and just winning the game. But at this point, Paul was actually seeming to like think that he had lost the game. And I was wondering if I had mistracked, but I think he was just down on himself about like something. But it was very, very, very annoying to me because I thought I was losing. But yeah, indeed, at the end of the day, Paul played bod and won. He didn't play bod here. He played the other bod, and he won the game. So bod comes down, lover comes down, and I lose by 8 points. So crushing defeat. That just crushes my hopes to just like save my nationals record. And yeah, the next game was the final round, and of course I was already not cashing in the tournament, but I was hoping to win my last 2 games, and I get to play Clay Daniel. I think this is the first time I ever played Clay in person. We played a bunch throughout the pandemic on Woogles, and I think he's gotten stronger. He was already a very strong player. So Clay is first to act, and he plays Vivid. And I start with this rack. I think I drew the first 6 letters and then turned over the Q, but it sort of looked like it could be an A for a second. I was hoping that I had castled on my rack, or I mean Citadel's dialects. But it was a Q, and the 2 options here are actually really interesting to compare. QI versus Delicts. So Delicts scores a lot more with 40 points, and it looks really good because if I draw another I, I'm pretty likely to hit the 7G spot for 45 points, which would give me around 85 over 2 turns. With a somewhat random rack, potentially less good than average rack if most of the time that I draw the I, because I'll probably be consonant heavy. Because I'm using a vowel that I would be drawing. And after Delicts, after QI for 21, I draw into a decent amount of bingos through this I, and if Clay plays through the I still draw into bingos like Castled that might hook his play, for example. So the upside to the play of QI is if I get a bingo, I've scored around 100 points over 2 turns. And the question is, how likely is one versus the other? And I determined that it was better, slightly better to play QI, and Quackle agrees. But usually I'm very prone to making the Q setup rather than the fish. So QI comes down, and Clay just exchanges. Another reason to play QI is that it really restricts Clay's plays. That's probably the biggest factor, actually, in QI's favor, is it's just very hard to make a play after it. So, yeah, we get to this position. I draw the U, and I see that I have ductile plus S, and I'm like, ductile, that doesn't take an S, that doesn't take an S, that doesn't take an S. And indeed, ductile doesn't take an S, but I had the play of Lucidist for 94 points, and I missed it. Bingo miss. This is a huge, huge mistake. Bingo would have scored 54 more points. And yeah, I play Sluis, which is the second best play, but way, 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 way worse than the bingo. So terrible miss in my last game of Nationals. Clay plays Mog, and I keep going. I don't know that I've missed a bingo, but I draw 7 consonants, and I exchange keeping RT. And Clay bingos with Earth, which doesn't take an S, and I was pretty sure of that when he played it. So here I draw into this rack of Tiddery, which is not a word, and I end up playing Hydrid. And this was sort of an attempt to exploit Clay. I know that Clay isn't like the best player when it comes to knowing all the words. So I thought that this was a very low probability word that he might not know, and he might not know if it takes an E or not. And especially since I would be playing this word, it makes it potentially less likely in my opponent's head that this does take an E, because this sort of play isn't very often made in the top division, just opening up a huge spot like that, unless someone's down by a lot. And I'm not really down by a lot. I'm down by 60. There's still a lot of game to be played. So I decided to make this sort of gambity move, hoping that Clay wouldn't know or would be unsure of Hydride. And he plays Podia, so I wonder if he had an E, but he ends up somewhat blocking the spot anyway. I draw the J, and I play Jelly. Just keeping RET, trying to bingo. Maybe I can even get a bingo on the 15 row. But Clay plays Par, and this play looked really weird to me. I held, and eventually I was like, okay, I accept. And yeah, Par is a word that's always looked weird to me. It just, to me, why would Par be valid? But I remember that this was a word, and I let it go, and I play my bingo. So now I'm ahead by 13 points, despite missing 94 points on my second turn. But Clay strikes right back with Couriers for 76. Couriers, however you want to pronounce it. And I draw into a blank rack, and I find only one bingo, and that bingo is Rejoiner. And Rejoiner is not a word. I think I also saw Ernirier for 59, but then I saw Rejoiner, and I was like, okay, that's better. It's 7 more points. But yeah, this isn't valid. Rejoiner and Rejoicer is valid. And when you compare these two plays, you realize that Rejoiner is so much worse than Rejoicer, not only because it could get challenged off the board, but also because the C really, really interferes with tons of scoring plays that Clay could have on the A file after Rejoiner. X plays, K plays, just any 4-tile play will score 50 points. This is a huge scoring spot that I was not happy to open. But yeah, this is a big mistake. I'm very lucky that Clay didn't challenge. And I'm also extremely lucky that Clay played Gulag for 24 rather than playing in that spot, which I was sure he was going to just hammer me there. But unfortunately for me, neither do I. I have no big spot or no big play in this spot at all. And the best I can do is sauna and get rid of my S just to prevent huge plays from occurring on the A column. And Clay hits me with the beautiful play of Cation for 44. And now I'm definitely playing catch up. I draw into a decent rack with two eyes. And here I played MOI, and this was really a typical tunnel vision play or autopilot play, I guess you would call it. I am in a really bad position here. I don't have the letters to score on the A column or the H column or even the 8 row. There's almost nowhere to bingo on this board. It's been very exhausted by a lot of the plays on it. The only bingo lanes are through this A, this T, and some 9 bingos through the S and the N maybe, and this D. Those are the bingo lanes on the board, and Moy blocks most of the bingos. And so the idea with Moy is that I will luck into some sort of scoring play next turn, and I won't need to bingo to win. And that makes sense when you think about it. It's very hard to bingo on this board. What should I do? Mina to open this M? It doesn't look very good. IoT is a terrible leave. Gosh, I hate saying lead instead of leave. And yeah, maybe I can draw into some 9-letter word. Maybe. Or some word through this A, but maybe a play through the M. Like, it just didn't seem right. It seemed like the H column was going to get taken after Mina, and I just played MOI. So I think, in hindsight, I think, yeah, my best chance is to maybe draw a big scoring play, but maybe I can play Moy here for 4 fewer points and leave the A and the T somewhat open, and that would have prevented what came next. What came next was Tiz for 40. Clay just scoring, and now there's 4 in the bag. I'm down 52 points, and I have this rack, which doesn't do anything for me. I can play on the A column. I can play Naif if I want to score some points. These all empty the bag. So I just made a Hail Mary play here, just thinking I was losing no matter what, pretty much. A Fen, just hoping that maybe Clay would play through the H, give me through the O, give me a bingo lane on the 1 row that I could bingo out and win, or maybe I would draw some insane word through the D that I didn't even see, or some 10-letter word. I didn't really know. Thought maybe I could also draw the Z and outscore Clay somehow, but it seemed really, really bad. I can draw, yeah, I can't even draw into ansats or ersats. So yeah, the game is very hard to win here. But any ideas on what might be better there are welcome. But I was done. Like, I just felt like, okay, well, this is over. Just get me out of here. Clay plays blow. I draw into a nothing rack, and I make, I think, a 7-point error in the end game by playing TEIN, which Quackle doesn't even find, which is funny. TEIN for 17, whereas I should actually play ETA, very weird looking play to set up 9 on the A column, just to prevent Fax, which is Clay's best play. So that was a 7-point mistake. Clay plays Fax, I play Bane, and I lose by 63, 372 to 435. In this game, I clearly blew on my second turn, and also on this turn, and lost my last 2 games of nationals, which means my win-loss record 16-15. Luckily, I won more games than I lost, but I just felt like I lost everything basically. And yeah, my attitude was really poor during this event. But seeing how I played, I'm less worried. I thought that I played like horrendously badly. I definitely had my moments of poor play, but I don't actually think I played really awfully this tournament. So next time that I'm not having a good tournament and I'm losing a bunch of games, I can remember that um, I performed decently well in those games during the 2022 Summer of Scrabble, and hopefully it'll appease my tendency to get really down on myself and self-loathing, and help me just take it one turn at a time. So that's my goal. I've always had issues with consistency and psychology, and it's an ongoing battle. And of course, learning the words very important as well. So, yeah, my faults were pretty clear in this series, but nothing that I can't work on. So I really appreciate you guys watching. For those of you that got all the way to this point, I thank you. It was a lot of game analysis. I'm ready to post different content now, and do some new projects and improve upon my YouTube content and my streaming content. So yeah, I'll see you on the next adventure. And tomorrow, you guys get a special video of round 20, dual commentary between me and Will Anderson, over our live streamed game. So looking forward to showing that to you guys as well. And yeah, until next time, signing out.